In the 1930s, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addressed the nation through a series of radio broadcasts known as the Fireside Chats. His aim was to reassure the common man that our society would recover from its troubled times. But we're far from 1930, and I deal with a different kind of fire. For a new era of worldly frustration, we offer a fresh conversation. I'm Greg Carlwood, and these are the Higherside Chats.
Welcome to THC, folks. Drinking a little drink, smoking a little smoke. From San Diego, I'm Greg Carlwood. Today I got the Joker Smoker Midnight Toker, Adam Gorightly back, a dominant force in the world of high weirdness. This time co-hosting the show with me, which is a goddamn pleasure in itself. Adam, what's happening?
Hey, nice to be back again. It's Groundhog Day.
Oh, it is. Right on. That's how not paying attention I am to the conventional things.
No, I meant Groundhog Day in terms of like.
Yeah.
The Bill Murray movie.
Yeah, because we did record yesterday. Well, we tried. We talked yesterday. We did not record. That's actually the problem. That's why we're here. For those of you who've been checking it out, Adam is also maintaining a weekly column at thehighersidechats.com called Transmissions from a Dying Planet, which you can see new entries in every Thursday. What's new, man? What's been occupying the mind of Mr. Gorightly lately?
Just working on a number of book projects. Hopefully those will come into fruition this year. Writing and recording a little music, and
all right.
Yeah, just staying busy here at the Gorightly corporate offices here in my laboratory.
Right on. Well, today's guest is going to be Andrew Colvin. He's an author, artist, and magi of the Mothman mythos. And if you're not familiar with Andy's work, folks, you might have read Adam's interview with Andy for UFO Magazine, which was his last Transmissions of a Dying Planet column entry. And how much work have you done for UFO Mag, actually?
The relationship with UFO Mag goes back, probably to the 90s, mid-90s or so. They've changed publishers over the years. Originally, It was started by Don and Vicky Ecker, who are pretty famous in ufology, and I wrote a book review or two for them back in the day. In recent years, the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's been taken over by Bill and Nancy Burns, another husband-wife duo. Bill Burns is known to most people probably from the UFO Hunters show.
Yeah.
And so I've started writing stuff for them a few years ago, and over the last year or two, they've had me jump aboard as one of their columnists. So I have a column appearing in each issue of UFO Magazine that's also called Transmissions from a Dying Planet. I like that title.
Yeah, it is a great title. I like it as well. The zine movement, I guess, was always kind of interesting to me, but because it was very underground, it seemed like that was the way to get knowledge before the internet. You know, I'm sure now the internet's kind of, if they haven't adopted, I'm sure they're struggling, some of these magazines.
Many have gone by the wayside. Most of them have gone by the wayside. And we were talking about this yesterday. You asked me where we got our information back in the day, us old folks, before the internet, and it was the zine movement. And the zine movement really kind of evolved into what is on the internet these days, as far as conspiracy writings and stuff on the paranormal. Back in the day when we didn't have the internet, it was kind of an underground network in a sense of people. I was into conspiracies, but I was also into the paranormal and psychedelics. And so you had a core group of folks putting out magazine back in those days that I kind of hooked up with. And I still have relationships with a lot of these folks, like, Paranoia Magazine, for instance, is still around. That started during that period. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other folks like Wes Nations with Crash Collusion Magazine. He published my early piece called UFOs, LSD, and Me back in the day, and guys like Greg Bishop, who put out the Excluded Middle. I'm still good friends with Greg. Ken Thomas, Steam Shovel Press.
Yeah, he's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. Ken is.
So that was that was the network back in the day, and we were kind of below, not really mainstream. Some of these folks have kind of gone into the mainstream and more widely known. But yeah, it was kind of a underground network.
Right on. Sorry, I took a second because Andy just messaged me that he didn't set his alarm and he just woke up, but he'll be ready in a few minutes. Must be nice to live that kind of life. If I forget
Indeed.
if I forget to set my alarm, I'm probably gonna have to move out of my house shortly after. Let's talk about that piece you wrote, that interview with Andy. It's an interesting idea. The whole UFO alien motif would have been created as an over-the-top distraction to keep the spotlight off what they were working on, which Andy says in the interview has blossomed into the manless drone technology we see today. And I don't know, I like to hope that the real story isn't quite so boring. But what do you think?
Um, well, yeah, that theory's been out there for quite a while. That there's a lot of disinformation. In fact, all the big stories, some would suggest, and I tend to agree with those who suggest this, that the such stories as like Dulce, the underground bases there with the secret pact between humans and aliens and all the dastardly doings they're supposedly doing down there is really a smokescreen for other things that are going on in these secret underground bases that probably do indeed exist, but it's to muddy the water and inevitably discount the real stories. If somebody's claiming there's underground bases in Dulce, I hear this another quote unquote conspiracy theorist. And same thing with Area 51 and testing secret craft out there that people point to and said, oh, those there's UFOs out there. Why you when I say UFOs, the common conception when people say UFOs is that they're piloted by aliens, but
right.
Why are these alien piloted UFOs always over these military installations? So that was a convenient smokescreen. There's other things going on at those bases. There are toxic dumps for nuclear weapons storage and these type of things, which are really, I think, what is being covered up by this the disinformation out there. A lot of people in the Dulce area and past decade or so have contracted cancer, that folks that live on the reservation. Right. So the story is probably more about nuclear weapons storage facilities and radiation leaking and these type of things.
Right. It doesn't seem as interesting to people like us necessarily, but to someone living in the area whose family's coming down with cancer, they probably wish they had some real information.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, that's the kind of where Colvin's coming from, and drone technology, he suggests, is really accounts for a lot of the UFO reports over the years, going back in time, that it was testing of this drone technology.
And that's definitely possible.
Yeah, which is, nowadays just right in our face. Soon to be in your backyard.
Yeah.
Probably already is,
I would just suspect the drones to look a little less like miniature airplanes. That the fact that they still hold that shape makes me kind of think, like, really, those, if they were flying UFOs, wingless UFOs, wingless drones 2 decades ago, why are they going with the model that seems kind of primitive by comparison?
Well, the models that we see, I mean, there's a lot of strange-looking craft out there. I've seen some of the wingless models are around today, and of course, going back, to the Nazi Bell craft and all of that, that might have been your first drone technology that got imported into the good old U.S. of A. with Project Paperclip.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole importation of all those Nazi rocket scientists back in the day were very influential in the U.S. space program.
Yeah.
So, there's a continuity there that, we can talk to Mr. Colvin about this. These are some of the areas that his research gets into.
Mm-hmm. I expect this conversation to be a wild one. I mean, I've spent all week digesting as much of his work as I could. I'm glad I got an extra day to do so. He's got so much out there, covers so many strange areas, and it's a lot to take in. I felt like I was cramming for an exam or something, but there's so much to hear about. But what about in terms of the thought that drones are responsible for the alien motif? What about Roswell? I mean, aren't there a lot of witnesses out there that said they saw bodies? Not that they have to be alien bodies, but they saw some type of strange humanoid bodies.
Well, I don't know how much of that is legend, and I don't, a lot of the so-called witnesses are all gone. I don't know how many really actually saw bodies, how much of that is the mythos surrounding the whole story. Once again, with all of these UFO tales, separating the wheat from the chaff is kind of a difficult thing to do sometimes, because there's obviously so much intended misinformation or disinformation woven into the stories. And there's all kinds of theories about Roswell as well, and he interviewed Nick Redfern, and his theory in his book Body Snatchers in the Desert, that they were basically using some real live humans that had, I think the disease is called Porgellins or something close to that. And they were basically used as crash test dummies. Maybe that's what was supposedly the bodies out there in the desert. Then recently you had Walter Bosley on your show, and he has another interesting theory, or basically it's information that he's received from his father that he's repeated over the years. Of course, we know Bosley was in Air Force intelligence, and his father was in military intelligence, I believe. I forget exactly what his job was, but he had information. This was kind of almost deathbed information that the senior Bosley shared with Walter, that the craft that crashed in Roswell actually came from the inner Earth, and that the beings in there were human looking, but they didn't have any hair. Now, make of that what you will. Who knows? And there's a lot of these stories of inner Earth beings. This is part of the whole UFO lore, paranormal lore going back in time, and maybe there's something to that as well. That there's this race of creatures that are also semi-human and that have been sharing the earth with us over all these years. Who knows? It could be the Neanderthals that are living in the inner earth, or lived in the inner earth. This is my theory take on the thing, because most Neanderthals are pictured as these hairy guys, but actually they didn't really have a lot of hair. And of course they had the larger size head. And a lot of the alien depictions you see, the beings have larger heads, and they're a little smaller than your typical human today. So maybe it's the Neanderthals.
It could be.
Who knows?
I mean, it is a little tough. I love the inner Earth stories, and I've heard some really, really wild ones, and that's kind of a direction I want to have a few of those guests on the show soon. But stories of mammoths and like giant paradises under the poles, really weird stuff that doesn't really seem possible, but is fascinating nonetheless. But it's a lot harder to believe that there could be beings on the same planet under the Earth than there is to think that they could be coming from a place that we can't even get to. That's kind of why it's a little bit slightly more believable, I guess. But this whole idea of the sensationalism behind disinformation, I think, is something that David Icke I would say he fell into it. I haven't really heard him allude to it directly, but he kind of says that, when he was going on his whole original storyline, he came up with he got the information that they're actually reptilians, and that's where everybody kind of tuned out, and everybody kind of said, well, I don't think they're reptilians, so everything you're saying must be bullshit, and I think that definitely set him back. But now it doesn't seem like he brings that up quite as much, or maybe he says that he thinks that they're taking, the elites at the top might be taking orders from some type of paranormal entity or some type of conjured spirit or something like that. He seems to have gone that direction a little bit, but I mean, I see how that can happen. Someone feeds you information, and then 3 months, 4 months down the line says, and you know what? They're all reptiles. And then you go out and say that, and you look like a fucking idiot.
Yeah, and I don't discount everything Ike says. I think, who knows, he might have been manipulated along the line. Maybe he's a useful idiot of some persuasion. I think he has some keen insights at time, and maybe that is going on. I don't discount the whole reptilian theory either. Maybe there is some sort of other realm running parallel with this, these other dimensions and things where entities pop in and out. That's definitely what I observed during my psychedelic UFO encounter back in the day.
I don't think we talked about that. You wanna give the cliff notes to that while Andy's still getting ready?
Oh boy, cliff notes. Drop some acid with a friend.
That's how it always starts.
Yeah, there's a little meme. No really great story starts with somebody eating salad. It's usually drinking or doing something. But
that's good.
And so, cliff notes here. We were warned about this stuff, that the guy who sold it to us, that be careful, it's been double dipped, and whatever. And it came on really heavy, and we were at this place, party house. Had to get out of there, man. It was the vibes were too heavy. We both agreed, this friend and I. And so there was a ditch bank, a levee nearby, and we thought that'd be a good place to kind of get away. We're in suburbia. And I joked before we hit the ditch bank, what if we saw a UFO right now? Nobody'd believe us, and we started laughing quite hysterically. Found that funny.
Yeah.
And before long, we saw our first UFO, and we saw a number of UFOs that night, and they were, at the beginning of the thing, they were kind of your classic shaped UFOs, but as it progressed, they became more cartoonish, something out of Dr. Seuss looking weird things. So that's kind of the extent of the experience. The friend I saw those with, we're still good buddies now. We've always had kind of a simpatico, write music together and these type of things. But when we were seeing these things, whatever they were, we were describing them to each other the same way. We were seeing the same thing, basically. So if we were hallucinating, it was a dual hallucination.
Right.
It could have been telepathically. We were beaming those images back and forth to our minds. I've been wrestling with this thing over the years, this experience, trying to figure it out. And I think part of it had to do that before we even saw the UFOs, we planted the seeds. What if we saw some UFOs? So that's kind of my working theory, is that we perform some type of unwitting ritual magic.
Well, that's what I would ask, is there seems to be a definite link between psychedelics and, if you want to consider UFOs paranormal experiences. I know Terence McKenna, famous philosopher of sorts, psychedelic philosopher, he had an experience the same way. He was on mushrooms and he saw some craft. So
Bill Hicks
as well, yeah. That was induced by medicine as well. Mm-hmm. So it is odd, and there's also stories of people doing ayahuasca. When they do it, they have visions and hallucinations, but the whole group sees those things sometimes.
They've seen the little grays on ayahuasca,
Mm-hmm.
or so reports Graham Hancock.
Right. Another great writer.
Yeah.
It's it's odd. I don't know. I've never done LSD, so I've heard that's a lot more of a visual kind of trip. So I'd be interested to do that, but these days I just am so busy that I can't take a day to do some serious psychedelics because I can't get in the right mindset. I'm like, oh, do I need to answer emails? Do I need to do this? Do I need to go to work? Is my store all right? So
hmm
I just can't cut loose like I could a couple of years ago. But LSD's on my list.
Oh, and certainly finding, I mean, it's the journey. If you look at it as a shamanistic journey, then there's amount of preparation that needs to go into this,
Right.
Maybe, perhaps, there's a reason you haven't done it yet, that you're not ready.
Could be. Could
Yeah.
be. I drive myself crazy thinking about the universe's influence on my life, or like some type of higher self, or some type of even this goes into synchronicities. But for example, yesterday we tried to record a show. Well, why didn't it record? Like, was there a reason to that, or was it just random me being an idiot? It's like,
I was thinking about that afterwards too, and I always look at things like that. Yeah, there was a reason that it didn't happen, that we're gonna do it again,
mhm.
that we're gonna
Maybe we said something yesterday that was wrong, and the universe is like, no, we're not going to put that one up. And then
or
maybe today it'll be a little different. Or
maybe we needed to go deeper into something. Maybe that was just a trial run for us doing the show together. Who knows?
yeah, maybe it could have been a rapport builder.
Yeah.
It's tough to know. It is really tough to know if things are just random, if the universe is random, or if everything is connected. And those seem to be the two opposing philosophies, usually between left and right brain people.
I don't get worried. Things have happened like that before. When I was doing the podcast, there were shows that got screwed up for one reason or another. I've worked on book projects, even as recently as a few months ago. I was on the road and I had my laptop. When I'm at home, I got an automatic backup system.
Mm-hmm.
But I was on the road and I wrote thought some good stuff, and I lost it all. And I was like,
Oh
oh.
fuck, man, that's got
But
to
then,
be that's the
but then
worst.
you step back and it's like, oh, maybe that happened for a reason. Maybe I'll rewrite that section and material and it'll come out better.
Yeah, I mean, at least it helps with your peace of mind, just
hmm
think that there's some kind of mechanism behind it.
Obviously, if you do it again, it's going to be different in some respects. So,
True. We've already proven that point.
yeah,
And
yeah.
looks like Andy is prepared. He's finishing his toast and coffee. So I'm going to go ahead and play the ad for Conspiratees, my conspiracy clothing company. And then on the other side, we'll talk to Andy Colvin about the Mothman and much, much more. Don't fucking go anywhere.
We're here because we don't buy into the bullshit of mainstream culture. We're tired of the mundane, passionless careers we've been shuffled into as a result of this orchestrated debt-based system of rule, and the stranglehold on education and entertainment by cold, soulless corporations. People, yes, we are frustrated. Yes, we are tired. And we reject the pre-approved tranquilizers that are Monday Night Football and an ice-cold Budweiser. But we have to stop hiding. Stop hiding behind the headphones and the Cherry Popper 420 username. Let the world see that the resistance is strong and society is changing. There was a time to be anonymous, but that time has passed. And so the Higherside Chats would like to present Conspiratees as the dawning of this new paradigm in the uniform of the revolution. Because bold fashion should mean more than some celebrity meat dresser frat boy in a silly pink polo. Conspiratees redefines bold fashion as having the balls to reject socially uncomfortable and unpopular truths from your radiant chest. All fucking day. Conspiratees.net. Let them know that you know. Bold designs for troubled times. Hard truths. Soft cock.
Yo!
Hey. All right, we're back, Higherside Chatters. I'm still here with my occasional co-host, Adam Gorightly, and I'd like to introduce you to the man that's been melting my brain all week. He's an artist and author of 5 books involving the Mothman mythos, as well as a 36-hour documentary film. His lifelong examination of strange phenomenon and the corporate government conspiracy have left him with brilliant tools of official story deconstruction and deep-level dot connecting. Andrew Colvin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Again, yeah. Let me...
Again. I've been on several shows where the equipment went haywire.
Oh, man. Me and Adam were just talking about the idea of, did that happen because of a random occurrence, or was it meant to happen? Did we say the wrong thing? Was it,
Or did you just fuck up?
Yeah, I could have done... Yeah, that seems to be the most likely answer.
We should ask the Navy for their copy of the transcript.
Yes, that's the next step. I guess let me start by saying that most listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with at least the pop culture version of the Mothman and the events of Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and 67. The basics being that this winged, humanoid-shaped, seemingly supernatural manifestation with red glowing eyes made itself known with a series of sightings leading up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge and the deaths of 46 people. Some say as a harbinger of doom, ushering in the disaster, while some say its intent may have been more to warn the people of the coming disaster. Well, Andy, with such an extensive history examining the phenomenon or the creature, what insights have you gained into its existence outside of the Point Pleasant events?
That there's a lot of BS around the story. A
common theme with paranormal and conspiracy stories.
Something that we said in our wonderful unrecorded show, which was really wonderful. Had to do with the doppelganger meme, and a lot of people think that it immediately means doubles of people, but it actually refers to a concept about how to wield power. In China, it's called the face. It's related to the idea of face. It's where you're saving face. So if you're in power, you create a cover story for messy or wet work or anything that has to be done for that power to continue. And so that's why we see a lot of the BS stories in everything. And with Mothman, it's this demonic black creature with no head and red eyes who really stopped appearing the minute that Silver Bridge went down. I've been hearing that for so long, and it's just so not true, and you keep wondering, why did they keep spreading? Why do people keep thinking that it stopped at the Silver Bridge? And there's something about that aspect that's important. The cover-up proves the crime. So,
yeah, it's weird because maybe the Mothman gives us a clues to some kind of clues into the paranormal that they just wanted to shut down, and a bridge collapsing seems like a pretty good catalyst to just be like, oh, shut the books on that one.
Yeah, he's. I believe I mentioned that the quality of his appearances, or how a paranormal event is usually spun as an outside thing, and then what they do in the media then is they pick the stories of selected assets whose stories will fit the cover story, and they avoid the others. And so those are usually not real stories, from what I've seen. They're hoaxes, or they are setups of some kind.
Just disinformation.
Yeah, a real sighting, because I do believe there's a real phenomenon, but there's a synthetic one laid over it. But a real sighting is some kind of interface between the human mind and either natural geomagnetic or EMF forces, or synthetically created by, and I don't mean by agents, but just something about man-made radiation and chemicals. Lots of things can be done to people accidentally just from being around a geomagnetic source that causes them to see creatures. And there seems to be a default alien face that Stanislav Grof figured out. Or was it Persinger? It might have been Persinger Michael Persinger, they did these experiments with LSD, but you can approximate LSD with other things and get people to see things, especially the alien face. There doesn't seem to be a default to Birdman, so that's sort of an unusual thing.
Right, and your book, Mothman Shrieks, the one that you shared with me, I mean, it goes into the history of cultures with some type of Birdman myth, and this seems to be fairly related, and that myth seems to be pretty widespread. I mean, you got stories of the Thunderbird, Garuda, Osiris, the eagle and the U.S. seal, the strange statue on top of the U.S. Capitol building with the bird raising from the crown of a guy's head. That's pretty fucking weird.
Yeah, I should clarify that. I think people are seeing the Birdman is not a default archetype, but it might be actually. It's just that because you can't trust Persinger or Groff ultimately, they may be spooks too. So they may be giving us information that's false and saying the alien face is the default image when the Birdman is. But the Birdman stories are just not propagated. The only ones that are propagated are the ones that are a little more questionable, actually, nowadays. Back then, I don't think, in 66, 67, it wasn't. It was just a flood of sightings, and they weren't picking and choosing as so much. And most of those sightings they had some variation in them. Most of the people I've talked to saw something that was like a man with feathers and a long neck, so that the neck bent down in front of you in the dark. You might see it as not having a head. Mm-hmm. The Garuda statues from India show detachable wings, so I've worked up a theory that Mothman might be Bigfoot, or they may be the same creature. And I believe yesterday I outlined a possible scenario whereby Keel had, because both were being seen at the same time in the TNT area, but Keel had revealed this to someone who might be a covert asset, who then decided to cook up a Bigfoot film, the Patterson film, so that by the time the Patterson film came out, we were just 2 weeks before the Silver Bridge collapse, and a bunch of other stuff was happening at that very same time, like LSD became illegal on the day that the Silver Bridge came down.
No way.
It's a bunch of things like that happened right on that day. I think, was it Hitler died, supposedly, the second death of Hitler? Or, because it's rumored that he went to Argentina.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And then some of the people lurking around the Mothman story, the Men in Black, or who may have been posing as outer space men, the spacemen like Indrid Cold, was saying that he was from Lanulos, this planet, and he took Woody there. And the description of it in Woody's book sounds a lot like Argentina or one of those Nazi havens down there where they had high-tech stuff, sort of out in the jungle there with people walking around nude and partying down. So I'm not sure where I was going with that, but answer the question.
Yeah, right on.
Hey, Andy, could you describe your own Mothman sightings and what those mean to you?
Yeah, and at the time of the first wave in late '66, I just saw a silhouette flying above my car. I had heard the stories of this thing being seen, and then I started to feel like it had honed in on me for some reason. And it was just a feeling, and it was just like, strange thing. And then I thought I saw it, and I may have been imagining it, I don't know, but my dad's reaction was kind of odd because he was driving, and I think he thought that I had seen one of the drones they were building at Carbide, because he mumbled something about the government, and I think he may have been working on them actually, because that was his specialty in the Navy, was fixing jet engines and things like that. So they probably came up with some new vortex type of engine for these early saucers. If you read up on the literature, there are lots of different ways they could build the engines for them. Some of them ran on chemicals, the mixing of two chemicals like a jet pack basically. And they would find at a couple of the saucer landing sites, they found tubes that sort of point in that direction, like in liquids and tubes and things that John Keel named a couple of the makers of the stuff, like DuPont was one of them. We kind of isolated down. I think we talked yesterday about how carbide, some of their stuff had been found at Roswell.
Right, yeah, and I'd never heard that before. And you were saying that there was some glue and some type of plastic that was found there?
Yeah, the Bakelite. The Bakelite story is kind of interesting. The family that made Bakelite sold out to Carbide, and then there was a movie made about the heir to the Bakelite fortune who killed his mother. She was a socialite. What was the name of that book? Anyway, interesting story. But you sort of see the German connection. So Tesla's patents were stolen by Lind, who was Hitler's neighbor. Lind partnered with Carbide and probably, started secret build. They started building the, they built a nuclear reactor there probably at the start of World War II in West Virginia, where I lived. Mm-hmm. Charlie Manson lived right across the river from it.
Right, we talked about that a bit yesterday too, and the Prescott-Bush connection. But to break down the Tesla information for people, because a lot of people are into Tesla. What you can find is really fascinating. He was way ahead of his time, and because he wasn't quite the capitalist, he kind of got thrown to the wayside. But you proposed that his notes and his all of his stuff was confiscated at his death and taken to Germany, which helped along the German technology, the Nazi technology that we seem to see come through in the paranormal a little bit. There's a lot of little things and suspicions that he was working on. They were working on craft, flying saucers and such. That all came from Tesla.
Yeah, Tesla had a drone that was really sort of his ultimate. And I'm trying to remember my exact source on this, on how Lind stole the patents. I don't think it's in the Lind company history book. God, I'll have to find that. But Lind was really the only other person who could compete with Tesla on certain things. Mm-hmm. Like, what do they call that? It has to do with liquids, cooling liquids, extreme cooling of liquids and heating of liquids to create gases.
Cold fusion kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, ultimately, yes. And but that's all Lind's stuff. But he got it from Tesla because Tesla's lab mysteriously burnt down just as he was going to patent all these things, and the patents were burned up, and then Lind patented them all. So the story is that Prescott-Bush was sent in to become Tesla's partner in the lab. He was his lab assistant, Prescott-Bush. This is the conspiracy theory. And George Bush was what's the monkey? What's that whole story with the monkey, Adam? Do you remember that?
I have no idea. Curious George?
Yeah.
Yes.
Curious George was the name that Tesla gave to George Bush Sr. because he was always messing around in the lab.
Really?
Yes. And then the minute that new movie came out, not too long ago, the artist was murdered. The guy who came up, or not, was he murdered, or it was something suspicious? There was something suspicious about it. The guy who wrote the Curious George books. Here he was making a joke, an inside joke about Bush Sr. The minute that movie came out, which would catapult him back into the news, he ends up dead.
Really? So the story of Curious George was based off of the interactions between Tesla and George Sr.?
Yes.
That is interesting.
Don't ask me how that came about, or
right.
I don't know how valid it is, but
that's interesting. I wonder what the symbology of the man in the yellow hat would be, because that's an odd way to describe someone.
Yeah, maybe Tesla wasn't the first to come up with his ideas. Maybe he claims he got his ideas from speaking to
entities, right?
Entities, right.
Yeah.
Which may be a causal error, because just because you're in touch with entities doesn't necessarily mean they're the ones giving you the information. I think if you're very imaginative and you can see imagery so concretely as he did, because he could just see the whole thing in his mind, whole invention. Now, I had just a couple of vague approximations of that when I was a kid, where I would just get the whole thing and see pictures and things that I would draw, and so I know that's possible, but I don't know that it's an entity doing it. It may be that you're seeing entities because your brain is just working overtime in so many ways that you are perceiving, well, you may just flat out be perceiving more of the super spectrum than the average person.
Could be. That's always seems to be the challenge, because we don't even understand our own consciousness. We don't really know how powerful it is, but there are other people who've said they've gotten scientific information or technological information from a source. The guy who discovered DNA, to my knowledge, he said he did that on an LSD trip, and it just came into his mind. So
what? That came up with the drawing of the DNA?
Yeah, who came up with the double helix structure. Francis Crick, I believe, was his name. And he said that on an LSD trip, it just appeared to him in his mind, and then he was doing research into DNA, and he saw the double helix, and he's like, that's fucking it right there. That's what I saw.
Yeah,
You know what Allen Ginsberg said about LSD, don't you?
Probably a lot of things, but what do you got?
It is the multiple million-eyed monster. It is hidden in all elephants and cells.
That is trippy.
Hey, Andy, can we backtrack just a little bit?
Well, I didn't talk about my
sighting.
I didn't. Yeah, I just remembered that. So then my friend, he said Mothman was visiting him. Flying saucers were landing in his yard, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he dared me. He said, I can show you this vision they've given me of 2001 if you hold my hand and stand in this place in our yard. And then I did, and I did see exploding buildings. And then I went into this life premonition viewing session where I saw my different lifelines I could take.
Wow.
If I went this way, I'd end up dead at this age, and all this stuff. And it said, and the answer was that I should essentially do art, but it said do an album, do a book, and do a movie. And you will be okay. And so when I hit 40, I started, because it said you'll start when you're 40. So I started when I was 4. I'd done art my whole life, but I really started trying to get something out there that would be, quote, official and all that.
Hey, so back when you had that vision, what year was that? How old were you?
That was 67. So I was 8.
Weird. So what induced this experience? You went into a neighbor's yard and you had visions of possible life timelines out of nowhere? Or?
Yes. Yeah, and we went back there in 2000-something and tried to see if it still worked, the vortex, but it didn't.
Man, maybe there was some type of earth energy or some kind of vortex.
You mentioned the vortex. Wasn't this connected to a UFO sighting or landing of some sort?
Yeah, he's around that same time he showed us marks in the yard and said the flying saucer had landed there. And then I would say over at his house right around then. And I woke up, I had a weird dream about little puckwudgies in the room, little furry men, and I woke up and he was screaming that they were in the room, that those little men were in the room or had been in the room. And his mom and dad came out and everything. And I always thought his dad was odd and strange and not very nice. He worked Carbide at the tech center. So they could have been experimenting on Tommy somehow. He had a 170 IQ at that time, right? Well, 4th grade, we tested for that, so that would have been a couple of years after that.
That's a pretty high score.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the guy was the smartest person I'd ever met, and smarter than his parents. So it was very strange. And 5 years later, I was at that house. He had to move away because everyone he sort of just got rejected in the community. He was scaring people. He predicted the death of the teacher's husband in class, and then the husband died a week later. And so that was about it. It was like,
wow.
Go somewhere else, dude.
Where's that guy at? Do you have any contact with that dude anymore?
We contacted his mother. She's a higher up in NASA. By the way, he saw his timeline, and he predicted he would work for NASA, and he did. But she's very protective of him and wouldn't claim that he wouldn't want to talk to us. So she seems to be covering up something. But I did get something from him. I got a box not too long ago from his address or from his town in Florida, and it had a fossil that he had appropriated from me. We traded things, and we were supposed to trade them back in the year 2001 when this attack thing happened. It's very odd. It's like, where did we even...
You saw a vision of the Twin Towers being hit in that backyard in 1967 at 8 years old, and then you made this pact with this guy that you were going to trade something back after that thing happened.
Yes, one of the items was a shrunken head.
Appropriate.
A plastic shrunken head.
Right, I remember those. Those were quite popular when we were kids.
And the fossil I had completely forgotten about, but I got a note saying, it was like, sorry it took so long to get this back to you. And there it was. And he didn't sign it, nothing.
Hey, could you touch upon the special school program you were in?
It was a new school earmarked by Robert Kennedy for some reason. He had connections in our town. One of LBJ's daughters, one of my classmates, who would have been my classmate in junior high from a neighboring elementary school, she ended up going to D.C. and being in LBJ's daughter's class. So there was some connections there with people in Charleston who were higher up in the Carbide pyramid. Like Michelle Obama used to work for Carbide. She was their lawyer for the Bill Paulin. So if you do Carbide right, you end up being rewarded. We certainly have a few people like that in Charleston today who give lots of money to Harvard and Ivy League schools. And because once Rockefeller came in, he really bolstered the Eastern establishment control of West Virginia because it was in trouble. During the Mothman era, there was so much rancor and striking at Carbide. The natives were restless. Mm-hmm. I think they sent J. Rockefeller in to get the state back under control during the 60s,
Yeah.
In the late, right after the Silver Bridge was probably, because I think he started running for governor in 1970, against Peter D. Beater, the originator of the reptilian meme.
Really? We talked about that a little bit.
Well, the reptilian meme, as far as it applies to politicians, he was claiming that in the 70s, he was claiming that Jimmy Carter was a reptilian. So what he was he was actually a Rockefeller agent. He had been in Kennedy's cabinet, too. Huh. He was an economist.
We got to give a little background on Dr. Peter D. Beater. What an unfortunate name. But he was one of the... he was an early conspiracy theorist, I guess you could say. And there used to be tapes circulating of Dr. Peter D. Beater, and I think I have a couple in my collection. He was putting out theories. This was during Reagan administration or late 70s. He was claiming that the stuff like the Russians had created androids and replaced our political leaders with androids, these type of things. Pretty wild stuff.
Yeah. Peter Beater, huh? That does not sound made up at all.
No. He was the template for David Icke. David Icke does exactly, and they both got money from the Rockefellers.
Really? Me and Adam talked about in the pre-show before we brought you in, we talked a little bit about David Icke and the idea of disinformation. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he's all disinformation?
Well, what Beater was doing was His book on economics is unbelievably great. You should read it. I can't remember what it's. Something about the dollar, the decline of the dollar, or something. And it's brilliant. Well, so is David Icke when he's just talking about something like elite bloodlines. But then they introduce the big lie, the big bullshit into the story, the reptilians, and it discredits everything else they've said. So the purpose is to identify the truth that you're supposed to not listen to for the rest of your life, tell you what it is, then tell you about the reptilians, and then it's wiped from your memory. It's almost like a hypnotic little thing they do.
But on top of... Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No,
I'm here. I'm here all the time.
No, I wasn't going to go anywhere that great. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you're also a pretty keen observer of synchronicities in general, both in your personal life we kind of talked about, and larger ones that link world events, Hollywood symbolism, and media manipulation of the human psyche, that kind of thing, which is the area I find most fascinating, the crossover between paranormal and conspiracy. And I was going to ask you if there were any recent big synchronicities that you've noticed and the untrained eye might have overlooked.
Yeah, I didn't have a really good answer for this one before yesterday.
Right. I mean, we can even go back to the most recent major thing that happened, which is Sandy Hook. I mean, there's some synchronicities there that you've noticed, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We had a, yes. Well, the theory of synchronicity is probably what we're getting at here. The theory is, again, you have a doppelganger, so you have real synchronicities in your life that you can recognize as real synchronicities. Then you've got, in the media, though, they've got synthetic synchronicities, which are put together in a way that causes, I won't say hypnosis, but it really is. Because think about when you have a synchronicity in your own life. Think about the charge you get. You get that little charge like, wow, it's exciting.
Right.
What they try to do is have that happen in one of their bogus stories or bogus cover stories about an event. So the synchronicities happen in the bogus area, and suddenly everyone gets excited about that. And then they're talking about it for 50 years. The same bullshit lie that started at the beginning. And you see this through all of the different UFO stories and Bigfoot. It's Bigfoot. Good God. Did I already said that I thought, did I mention that Bigfoot was a stand-in? I don't think I got to the stand-in part. So Keel let it out that there were these two creatures being seen together. And one of our favorite cryptozoologist friends, who was monitoring Keel at that time, I think, took it to his buddies, and then they cooked up the Patterson film. And then so 2 weeks before the bridge comes down, the Patterson film comes out, then they stop talking about Mothman and say he's gone forever, and then they just talk about Bigfoot from then on. Because Bigfoot is non-controversial. It doesn't give people premonitions.
It's a monkey man.
It doesn't give premonitions of assassinations, which might get people excited about finding out who killed Kennedy, who killed Martin Luther King. That was one of Mothman's prophecies, Martin Luther King.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
So, if the word gets out that people have been having premonitions of Martin Luther King's shooting, people get excited by the synchronicity, want to find out who really did it. So they have to come up with something that just deadens people, and there's nothing more dead than Bigfoot. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to see it walking around, but as a media story, it's boring. It's like, okay, who, I mean, he just lopes around in the forest. He doesn't give a shit about politics.
Right. There seems to be something in the blind spot that we just can't get our hands on, that they've kind of roped off, exactly what they rooted out from the Mothman mythos. It's like it's a paranormal part of the equation that they sort of keep us from discovering.
Yes, well, the spooks infiltrate religion. Religious institutions and academic institutions are the prime targets of spies and have been for millennia. Because that way you control people's imaginations, their faith, their belief, as well as their academic teaching. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about how our system came down from the Prussians, who had designed it to make sure that their boys would shoot at the Napoleon soldiers. And so we've continued that same line, which makes us more likely to shoot at other people. And then you add antidepressants to the mix, which actually deadens the part of the brain that allows you to have compassion for other people. And bingo, school shooters. And I don't think they care the least about stopping the school shooter phenomenon. There's no discussion whatsoever about the drugs.
Right. And, well, that's the next question is the school shooter phenomenon. Like, is this just a byproduct of a sick society, or are these Manchurian candidates, or these MK Ultra mind-controlled people that are selected to carry this action out, or are they just patsies and they really have some sharpshooters in there carrying it out?
I think it's probably all of those, depending on the case. I think some of these guys are directly programmed, some aren't. Some are a victim of a mass programming that I just described.
Right.
And it could be as simple as they've gone through the school system, they're on some drugs, they've got a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist is connected, they beam a couple of waves at them, and boom. I mean, I think you can probably cause somebody to start shooting pretty easily if you know how to do it.
And that's a scary thought for some people.
With HARP, they can supposedly control our gross behaviors, make you feel happy or sad, simple stuff. So, there's no telling what they can do with a satellite if they beam the particular wave at you or me. Or I'm quite sure they can, kill you. We talked about that incident, or a series of incidents at the DuPont plant where my stepdad worked, where he and other people had seen burning men running on fire.
Right.
I speculated that, and I know these are real stories because I worked there, that I speculated they were, since Carbide had the laser technology that they had gotten from Lind, who had gotten it from, Bruce Roberts. Bruce Roberts worked for Lind. He's the gemstone file guy. He discovered artificial rubies, and Lind stole them from him and probably started building the death ray where I lived. That may have, that may have been what they were doing at the TNT area. In fact, it may not have been a Nazi bell. I talked about how the Nazi bell, the Kecksburg crash thing device I know it was moved to Wright-Patterson, but it could have been moved, or a copy made at the TNT area, which would have helped bring the bridge down if you had a Nazi bell spinning underground. They have to put it way underground, or else it vibrates the crap out of everything. And the nuclear reactor at the Tech Center run by Carbide, now owned by Arco. Well, it was run by Arco at the time, which is now BP. They built their thing way underground, their nuclear reactor. So they already had experience with building these deep underground things.
Would you say that it seems that a lot of this stuff that you talk about comes from DuPont, Union Carbide, and some of these corporations? It seems like these corporations are the ones that hold the real power, that if you were to go looking for secrets, you wouldn't look for disclosure from the government. You'd look in the archives of some of these corporations. They seem to be almost surpassing the government black ops projects in a way.
Yeah, well, they're running. I mean, that's their idea. The government is a brainless entity that really is just its real function is to distribute money.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the corporations are at the heart of everything. So.
Well, I know talked. Go ahead.
Well, in that area, you really have the birth of the petrochemical industry. That valley that I lived in, once covered by Indian mounds, they were all torn down, different chemical plants put on them, and that was the place that coal tar was. I don't know if they discovered the process for it in Germany and sent it over, but there's a lot of crossing back and forth of information between Carbide and IG Farben. So like when the Nazis were attacking, we were sending them, I think we were probably sending them synthetic fuel. I know we gave them the patent for it. And Prescott Bush was running their steel industry. And he lived near the area. I mean, he's only about an hour away from, the Bushes are an hour away from Point Pleasant. But in the media, they're always described as being from Texas or Connecticut, but they're an Ohio Valley, industrialist family from way back. You go back to the late 1800s or the mid 1800s, they discovered gas, natural gas in Charleston. That was also where they had all the salt mines. And underneath the salt, you have natural gas, and then underneath that, you have the oil. So the whole frickin' big oil thing, and now Big Pharma, you see, because they control Big Pharma. Today we have Bayer running a lot of things. They're the ones calling for all the natural gas to come in from the areas around so that they can crack it as quickly as possible. Bayer is the one that's doing it, and so a lot of the profits from the fracking are going to go out of country. But that's all started in the late 1800s, where you had Carbide's first cracking plant way upriver from Point Pleasant up to Elk River. That was the first place that Mothman was seen in 1966. So Mothman actually appears over these plants, you see, and then he gives people premonitions of assassinations and things. So it's almost like he's trying to reveal, it's almost like he's saying the Nazis and their nuclear power are going to destroy you unless you do something, and they're killing your leaders, et cetera, et cetera. So I sort of am working on, or just running that through my mind lately, the fact that a lot of our problems are because we are a colonized country, and we have our colonial masters who still run the show, I think.
Yeah.
And there's certainly, BP now runs all of Standard Oil's prior holdings. They bought most of Standard Oil. So, and then they go and they blow the well in the Gulf of Mexico and ruin it for everybody. And they don't even care. I mean, they didn't give a hoot. You remember that? Remember the?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of suspicious activity around that. I mean, I don't know that much about it, but there was some talk that Halliburton was involved in doing some of the security measures, which of course fell through. That was a weird one, because it seems like just bad PR all around for the corporations that are supposed to usually try to stay out of the spotlight and do their nefarious deeds in private. It was a odd thing to stage, in my opinion. I guess I don't really understand their motivation.
Well, that's why they blew the levee when Katrina hit. They're trying to depopulate the area and make it into a huge oil refining place. Drive out the locals who have been there forever.
Just make it all industrial.
The Delta of Louisiana has the oldest indigenous American, I can't say which one's the oldest, but you've got Indians in California that go back, clear evidence they've been there more than 10,000 years. Got this same thing in Charleston, all along the Kanawha River, the land that was given to George Washington by the British after they made their deal. So that was all 8,000-year-old cultures. You can clearly find evidence, pottery shards and stuff. So, but the Louisiana area is really a bastion of America. It's like real America, like real black people that lived here before the slaves came. This is what they're trying to cover up. The entire ownership of the country by people of color. They want to make it a white country, but it's not. It was not a white country. And they want to drive the locals out. They want to drive those locals that have been there for centuries out.
Makes sense to me.
It's all
Hey, Andy.
Yeah.
We've been talking about Point Pleasant and Charleston, West Virginia, and all the high weirdness and spookiness going on there. And Charles Manson grew up in the area, same block as you did. And do you think that area is basically an MK Ultra operation going down there, or went down there back in the 60s? You also mentioned about the special school program you were in, or we kind of touched on that. Do you think you were the subject of some type of psyops as well as Charles Manson before you? And Tommy and the people growing up in that area?
I think they were selecting. They definitely had a little program there to select the smartest students, and it seemed like they were going after the science kids, though. So I didn't, because I could draw so well. One day I woke up and I could draw like Picasso. Well, I guess that doesn't really say much because most people think of Picasso as like, but so they just figured, oh, there's an art kid, and I was a bit of a troublemaker, so I don't think they were interested in me, but they did. One of the other quote genius kids ended up working for. He does consulting for Bayer and those big corporations. Harriet worked for a agency cover company, but she doesn't talk about it. She won't tell me. It does. She was just she just loaded planes. I don't think she was a spook or anything, but some of her aunts and uncles were. And one of them ran the China Lake facility for a while. Her dad worked on the listening station that the British have, built with the NSA in West Virginia, where they listen to all the phone calls and everything. So her dad was working on that at the time of all this Mothman stuff. And Indrid Cold actually came to her house because someone had blown up her dad's car when he got in it and started it.
Let me stop you right there. Tell our listeners, give a little background on Indrid Cold and any interactions you might have had with him.
Yeah, he showed up the night that this golden sphere fell out of the sky. They sent out Fred Krisman, it sounds like, to look for it because he showed up. And then Indrid Cold shows up at the same time and starts talking to Woody Derenberger, who worked for Carbide.
Now, is Indrid Cold a man? Is he a manifestation?
Oh, I think he's a man, and I think he actually flew a drone around. It's either that or they were implanting the memory of a saucer after they had mind-controlled the person.
Now, some people perceived Indrid Cold as a spaceman, an alien, right?
Yeah, because he obviously wanted Woody to tell the story about that he had met this spaceman. So he wanted that story to get into the media so that as they went around, probably flying things around, either to find these golden spheres who had fallen out of something like a recovery operation. They were doing a secret recovery operation for the Navy in the TNT area at the time of Mothman.
And Woody was Woody Derenberger, is that the correct name? And I guess he wrote a book, something about his friend from Lanulos. Is that right?
Yeah, visitors from Lanulos, and you can tell when you read it that they were hypnotizing him, I think. And he actually mentions it. He gives 2 or 3 examples of people that were drugged by Men in Black, and he clearly. Indrid Cold was not from outer space and was a Man in Black. That was Woody's own view. So since the TNT area was owned and is still owned by Olin Corporation, which has the Rockefellers on its board, they were pretty much controlling whatever was happening there. And so Indrid was, I think, one of their agents. And Harriet's neighbor. So Indrid shows up claiming he's FBI and gets Harriet's mom to agree to be an informant. So I think they may have planted this. They planted a suitcase of heroin between the houses. So Harriet found the suitcase, took it to her mom, and her mom told the FBI that her neighbor must be dealing drugs. And this guy turns out to be, I think, a member of the Bruno crime family out of Philadelphia. Now, who controls the Bruno crime family out of Philadelphia? Alan Dulles. Dulles is supposedly the person who came up with the ET meme for use in covert ops. It all ties together, really.
Right, all coming from that area, an area in West Virginia.
Yeah, but because it was in the boonies, they had elements of the state and the mob in the big cities nearby controlling it. So the Philadelphia mob controlled West Virginia at the time.
So when Charles Manson was there, do you think they were grooming him to be a future patsy of some sort?
Yeah, definitely. Well, they were either that or just sadistic torture in the Jesuit orphanage.
Mm-hmm.
He said that they had ex-Nazis running the place. Now, he worked for one of these chemical companies. Manson worked at the gas station at the bottom of Woodward Drive, which was a Sunoco station at the time, and that is a Rockefeller company. And then I noticed that recently I just found some info about the Process Church.
Mm-hmm.
No, or was it the OTO? Do you remember that thing that I mentioned on Mothman Talk, Adam, where was it the OTO that owned an Arco station, or was it the Process? It was the Process.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
I'm pretty sure it was the Process. And this is from an FBI document that someone posted to Mothman Talk. And so it said that they owned the station and that blanked out name worked at the station.
It was probably the OTO, I would think, because the Process didn't come along until the late 60s. Hey, on the Manson story there in Charleston, I really became aware of your work before I knew what your name was, but it influenced the Shadow over Santa Susana, my book on the Manson family, and the story that Charles Manson there as a kid growing up in Charleston knew Sarah Jane Moore, who grew up in the area. Sarah Jane Moore later attempted to assassinate President Gerald Ford in the early 70s, and this was the first connection I had ever heard linking these two people, which was quite a revelation. What all do you know about that story?
Let's see. I've read 2 or 3 books on Sarah since then, but that just came from watching the TV, and I saw it on the news. Mm-hmm. We knew that both of them were from Woodward Drive. We both heard we'd heard those stories around the neighborhood. So
yeah.
Anytime I saw a Manson story on the news, I would listen. And in this one, they interviewed the local shop owner who owned the comic book store there, and he said that those two knew each other and would come in holding hands.
You know what I find interesting about that is the other person who attempted to assassinate Gerald Ford in that same period, early 70s, was Lynette Squeaky Fromm, who was a Manson family member. So, that just brings up some rather curious connections. And we know who Gerald Ford's vice president was during that period, right? Yeah,
it appeared to be a way to help Rockefeller, or a clever counter-op to make it seem like Rockefeller was behind it.
Yeah, Nelson Rockefeller was the vice president at that time. So,
wow. Yeah, you also brought up an interesting connection, a possible connection between Prescott Bush and Manson last time we talked, saying that, Manson's father is supposedly this General Scott that no one really knows, and it could possibly be George Bush Sr.'s father making George Bush Sr. and Charles Manson brothers.
Yeah, because it's possible that they would have had associations with Manson's mom, the Bushes, because they're from Cincinnati. The Bushes are nearby in Columbus. And then Prescott is obviously working with the Rockefellers. He and Frank Rockefeller ran their steel company in Columbus, which was Buckeye Steel. It's now Worthington Industries, which is where Mitt Romney went to when he was touring Ohio. So they still have these little bastions of Republican hatred that they go to. Now, right next to Worthington Industries in Columbus, you have this Masonic lodge that has Joseph K. Smith's aprons in it, indicating clearly that, to me at least, that Mormonism was set up as a franchise of Masonry, and that the Bushes were somehow probably involved in that.
That's an interesting connection as well. I wanted to try to get back to some more modern stories, because I love that we talked about that yesterday, and it's a sad thing that we lost it all. But you do a great job of pointing out some synchronicities and really, I guess, rhythms of the media story arc that people are fed. In particular, recent events, we got 2 school shootings. We have more than that, but 2 main school shootings where in both cases the initial reports are that there's multiple shooters, and then all of a sudden there's one guy. And then in the John Holmes case, you have what looks to be someone completely different in the courtroom than the picture that is put out on the media, because when you splice them together, the nose and jaw are completely different. And then you got the Sandy Hook actors. That's a really creepy situation where people are laughing right before they go on the air to talk about the killing of their kid that just happened. The coroner who is cracking jokes when he supposedly just walked out of a room where he's pulling bullets out of kindergartners. Very strange stuff. Can you shed some light on that? Because a lot of people see that they see that something's not right, but it's very hazy and it's hard to really figure it out.
One thing I mentioned was this, the alignment with the Mayan calendar, the end of the Mayan calendar, that this was part of that, was to completely kill any hope of people that there would be a better day coming after the 21st.
And that's an interesting thought, too, because you had before December 21st, 2012, you had a big split between people who thought it was doomsday and people who thought it would usher in a new age where we would be living in peace and, sharing all our food or whatever, some happy utopia. And, I guess it seems like right before that date came on, they just moved the needle back the other way, affecting the consciousness in an extremely negative way with the killing of kids, a massacre of kids. You can't really get more severe than that.
It's part of the trance state that they like to keep us continually in, and I'm pretty sure they use Milton Erickson's techniques, which often do use amnesia in a way. Erickson could pull you right out of where you were sitting and have this whole conversation with you, and then click his fingers, and the person's sitting back in their chair, and they don't remember even having the conversation. So you have that kind of a ritual sacrifice, and it puts everybody into a trance, which is just like 911. And then you follow up with a barrage of programming at a subliminal level, a lot of it, or on the surface. And they've really been hammering us since then with a lot of propaganda. And they're really just pulling out a lot of stuff from the Cold War, the same old memes, really worn out crap.
And do you think that there seems to be some type of rhythm to all this? Like it coincides with dates that are important in the occult. It seems very strange. It's like the programming follows this pattern. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, they seem to go for 2 weeks, and then there's a week off whenever there's a pagan holiday or a holiday with any occult significance. They really lay it on thick, and I think they plan some of the trials that they have, scam trials for any kind of scamming that's been going on, or Senate inquiries, or the release of bad information about the latest Chase scandal. Anything bad or anything embarrassing to the elites will get smashed in there into that around those holidays. But there'll be all these fantastic, crazy killings and reversal stories. A reversal story also will induce a trance. If there's a story reported in the official media that you don't expect to ever see in the official media, it is a reversal story just by that fact. And then often they'll have reversal in the story, in the content of the story.
Define a reversal story kind of for the people who might be new to the idea.
It's on one level, it's something that shocks you. You're like, how the hell did this story make it into the news? Like, this can't be, trying to think of some of them.
Well, here might be an example that we did discuss is you can find it on YouTube. Anderson Cooper saying that they busted a giant child pornography ring within the Pentagon, and that most Pentagon agents in that building were looking at child porn. That seems to be really, really odd, and it's skating close to the line of Project Monarch sex slaves. And right around you saw one story of it and it went away, whereas we hear you got this story of this football player who fell into some relationship online with a woman that turned out to be a man, and you hear about it for a week. Well, which story seems more important to you?
Yeah, anything that's got a real twist in the story that you've never heard before. Something that doesn't seem to go with the laws of physics.
Oh, something like that.
So that would be, the military watching porn, Pentagon, right? Pentagon guys watching porn. That starts to sound, that kind of thing has happened enough that it's almost expected in a way, and the same with preachers or a priest, right? And I guess that there may have been one time at which that would seem like a reversal story, because it's like, what? Why would they be doing that? But after you've heard it enough, it's no longer a reversal story. It's something that just needs to be covered up. So they continually have to create new reversal stories as the old ones, the old ops get outed and become normalized. So now, you see another story about pedophilia and you're like, oh, like, it doesn't seem. I was trying to think of
just raping kids again.
Yeah, I was trying to think of an example where if you heard that this particular kind of person was doing that, where it would seem shocking. Can you think of one? I mean, teachers are doing it, preachers, whatever. I mean, is there anybody that would be surprising to hear that they had been engaging in pedophilia?
I can't. No, I mean, as far as people who are put in positions of power, it seems like the abuse of power almost always includes children.
It's horrible, but it's part of the programming. And we've talked, I won't go into it here, but there are antecedents to this that go way back. But the reversal stories are meant to trigger the trance, and then you'll usually have a school shooting within 2 days. And there were about 10 of those last year where I saw the reversal story and said something about it, and I said, watch out for a shooting in the next 2 days. And I think I was right every time. I may have missed it once, but it could be that I just didn't find whatever they were doing, And
how could you help someone to recognize the pattern, to kind of discern when a disaster might strike? Is there a way to decode this rhythm?
Well, they go in stages. I think it's pretty easy to see the basic, inducement of the trance, the trauma, and then the reprogramming. Those are all pretty easy within your selected area. Like, there'll be weeks where nothing happens, and then everyone starts getting nervous. Right? Toward the end of that week, it's like, oh, shit, there hasn't been a school shooting or something crazy this week. What's it going to be next? And then next week, do it. And during that next week, you can actually trace the flow. And they're putting embarrassing stories to the elites in there to get them covered up. Now, if there's a great, glowing, wonderful story about some corporation, they'll just have that sitting out there right in the middle of that dead time, so everybody will notice. Right? All the bad stuff gets crunched in with a bunch of bad stuff.
And what about the idea, another thing we had talked about, the idea of symbology of these events almost as a celebratory thing, like the one I brought up was the Olympics. The Olympics opening and closing ceremonies, they seem to be full of really aggressive symbolism celebrating some of the attacks that were around the time. They actually had a Batman and Robin running around. They had those orange-haired acrobats that looked just like they were made up like John Holmes. Acrobats in suits just flipping around. They had a segment of chic line dancers. There was the chic shooting right around that time. The lighting was capstoned pyramids all the way around. Are they just gloating?
That's really what it felt like to me when I saw it, man. It really did. It's like they were, the day that the Gulf oil blew off, they were having a party on top of the rig. And they fly off in a helicopter, and it blows up like an hour after that.
Man.
Hitler's birthday, and that was when I knew. I was like, it was Hitler's birthday, and they always do something around Hitler's birthday. Now, I'm not saying all Brits are Nazis or anything, but there's a certain element of the upper class there that does like to control, and they'll use any technique, and some of them were helping the Nazis and were all for all that, the big industrialist types.
Mm-hmm.
So, where did we start? What was that question again?
We were talking about symbolism, and I brought up Olympic symbolism, and then you were talking about the rig, the party on the rig.
Yeah, the Olympics. Yes. Yeah, it definitely seemed like what were they saying? They were saying we are the country of weird pedophilia, magic, terror. That's what we are, and that's what we are because we're following their model. They have controlled our TV industry from the beginning.
Yeah.
And our movie industry to some degree. The Germans are in there too, and the Italians, and the French, but it's all just, to me, it's all just like we're this little resource playground for the Europeans. At least that's how they view us. I don't think they take us seriously.
No. And there definitely did seem to be an element of magic to it, some type of influencing of the consciousness, influencing of the subconscious mind with the parading of these celebrations of disaster, of tragedy. It's a very odd thing, and I wonder if there's some mechanism to the mind that they understand. I mean, it seems like they've got it mapped out pretty well on how to influence the mind. That seems like a strange way to do it, though.
Use degradation and demoralization techniques. So we talked about the demoralizing aspect of something yesterday. What was that? I can't remember what it was, but they flood our country with degradation. And they're the ones who really like to report on it, too. If you notice, the UK Daily Mail has endless stories about horrible atrocities in America. Yep. Stuff I wouldn't even print it because it's just going to cause more people to do it.
Right.
This is how they messed with the Chinese. I mean, they bring in drugs, vice, guns, cause skirmishes, control the country. They've been doing it a long time, and they know how to do it, and
they've got it down to a science.
Yeah, they do.
Another area that you talk about that you seem to be able to give a lot of insight to is just the idea of the personal synchronicities, and that's something that I've always had a tough time with. I mean, even like we discussed, the failure to record yesterday's show, was that just my incompetency, or was there some driving force in the universe behind making this chain of events go differently? But I always think about personal synchronicities and try to find them, but I always seem to be off. Like, I'll wonder what time it is. I'll be like, oh, maybe it's 11:11. I'll look at the clock and it'll be like 4:38, and I'm like, well, fuck, that's nowhere near. What does that mean? Or you say the next song that comes in.
You saw 4:38?
Well, just I'm just throwing out a random number, but yeah, was there significance to that random number?
That's the death number. No, I'm just kidding.
You got me. But right, it's like it's there. You got to take it lightly, but there is there seems to be something there. What have you seen anything with the 11/11 phenomenon?
Oh yeah, there's a lot to that. It is at the time I started dealing with it, there was only one book out on it, and it was all New Agey. It was from the 1990s, early 1990s. This was about 2006, I think. And we found this building with the 1111 address in Akron through a weird series of events involving men in black with government vans with the license plate 1111 and buildings that look like 1111 from the sky where Army internet spooks may live because we saw the stickers on the cars in the parking lot. And a Mothman sighting occurs a mile away, and 2 people die who at the same time that we know. And we were all getting weird phone calls from 000. And anyway, it just dawned on me, there must be more here. And pardon me. So I began to realize that 1111 was really an analogy for XX, or that the two were both related. And so, like I mentioned Joseph Smith's Masonic aprons. Well, I also looked up George Washington's at that time, and then I realized the 1111 and the XX were both in there, prominently displayed. So it's some sort of ancient symbol that.
And explain that connection to people, because you had said, and when you look at 1111, it's like 2 X's open. Versus, it's like a revealing of information. Then when you close the X's, or when you close the 1s in the numeral, it creates an X, and that's like a closed gate to information. And I thought that was really fascinating, because it does seem like people always say when you see 1111, you're supposed to that's like a light going on, like the old symbology of the idea light.
Yeah, that's similar to the light, to the little tingle you get when you have a synchronicity. But yeah, that's I don't know exactly. I think one's exoteric and one's esoteric. Exoteric. Anyway, inner and outer. The secrets versus what you say to the public. Mm-hmm. The normal person versus his doppelganger or his patsy. The meme that's truthful and its counter meme that is not. And that's what I mentioned earlier about controlling, using power. In fact, there's a Chinese book, an ancient Buddhist text, that describes the use of power as opening and closing a gate. And that's similar to that. You've got an open gate, which is the 11. It crosses, and suddenly it's a closed gate.
Well, there's a lot of uniforms that have an XX on their XX patches on them.
Well, it is the Masonic symbol. The compass and square is an XX. It's just hidden there. They're connected. And, the XX is what forms the swastika. It's just broken up into pieces and rearranged. And N1H1. When that came in, I realized immediately it was a bogus disease.
Do you think there's some kind of natural power behind these symbols, or is this just something man has created?
I don't know. It could be that. Well, it's in the Masonic lore. You have the 2 towers, the 11. That's real old, and I don't know if it goes back to the Greeks. It probably does, in the way they did their columns or something. But somewhere along the way, it was adopted in the Masonic realm, and somehow George Washington was chosen, and I think Joseph Smith was chosen to carry out a specific mission. And I think Washington and Franklin both were working for the British, and they were both owners in the Transylvania Company, which was the company that basically owned this area that we're talking about, Point Pleasant. Mm-hmm. And so through that mechanism that Washington was paid for his efforts at setting up the federal government in a way that would create a doppelganger government. We have our supposed country of America, and then you have the corporation of America, and it actually literally is set up that way in the Constitution, or is it the Articles or whatever. Each state exists as its own entity, but then Washington, the very first thing he did in office was create a second set of states that copied the first states, and those are all the legal entities that were under the Corporation of America, which was still owned by the British.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting information out there from Aaron Russo's movie and other things about the idea that when you're born, your birth certificate is a form of forming a corporation that you represent in the same manner. It's very odd that they would need to go through all this, put all this energy into making sure everything is documented legally when they're just going to be criminals anyway.
When they're going to be criminals?
Right. When the controlling elite is just going to go ahead and do whatever they want, they seem to be really fixated on making sure everything looks neat on paper.
Well, the reason for the paper is legal contracts between corporate entities or any entities are more important than anything. And in fact, if you, like your insurance, if you name someone as a beneficiary on your insurance and you get divorced from them later, that doesn't matter to the insurance company. So they're definitely stronger than marriage contracts, but it's just a way to mind control everyone into thinking that they have to do what they're told. It's it's on paper here, and here's the contract.
Well, I know Adam said he had to get going right about now. Adam, are you still there?
Hello.
Hey, I just wanted to send you on your way. Andy, if you got a few more minutes, there were a few other questions I had for you, but I know Adam had to get going. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Adam.
Okay, take care, Andy.
All right, man.
Bye,
Go
Greg.
lightly. Go rightly. Take it easy. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Thanks, man. But yeah, Andy, I'm really interested in recognizing synchronicities because, like I said, I try to do it all the time and I really get nothing out of it. How would you advise someone like me who knows about the knowledge of synchronicities but just isn't really being able to tune into them in their own life?
Wow, I've never been asked that. That's a good question. Jeez. I don't look for them, but they come in cycles. They were sort of driving my research. I mean, that it really was kind of magical, and I don't have any synchronicities now. And I'm studying them as they seem to appear in the media, but I don't think those are real synchronicities. I think they want you to think that there's some synchronicities going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how you would create them at all, other than, God, I don't know.
I just can't seem to recognize them. If the universe is trying to talk to me, I'm fucking missing it. That's all I can say.
Well, do you feel like they may occur when you're taking a chance, like, because to me it felt like a chance. What I was doing was it's that the wall of something that, what does Peter Moon say, the wall of oppression or something like that, where you approach the truth. As you approach a truth, if there's a lot of collective unconscious pushback against that truth, I think what's happening is you might have some programming in there that's telling you not to do it, and it makes you afraid, and that raises the tension level. I think the tension level can cause synchronicities.
Because the Mothman almost seems like just a more extreme version of this similar phenomenon, like a more in-your-face version of, some type of outside force, the universe trying to direct you and, give you some type of signal. And for those that are missing the 1111s, they're getting the Mothman. It's like, hey, look at this. There seems to be an intelligence out there that is interacting with people in that way. And I would like to induce that, if possible.
Are you, well, I mean, I use the collective unconscious idea as a way to explain it. And I've studied Buddhism, and Buddhism has kind of a good model for understanding how that all works. There's essentially one mind and one consciousness behind everything, manifesting physical reality. Or there's intelligence in light waves. There's intelligence in particles that maybe somehow is transmitting between all of us So we all have a form of telepathy that right now is very latent because we've been programmed by humans.
Right.
But I think there may have been a time when people did a lot of telepathy. They just didn't have to talk as much.
I hear that idea too, coming out of the New Age community a lot, that things like fluoride in the water, even the trauma through these disasters and these school shootings, even the nutrients being taken out of the food, even just the 9-to-5 job, actually the structure of the linear calendar itself keeps us out of these rhythms and cycles. But a lot of people do suggest that there was a time before all this control manipulation where we did have some innate abilities of telepathy, telekinesis, these kind of mind powers, and this more connection to the earth is where they might have came from, and that's been stripped away. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking about that lately. I was raised in the TV generation. The TVs were in homes from when I was a kid, but we didn't watch it very much.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not like people do today, and there wasn't very much programming. Maybe a half an hour each day, your favorite cartoon, but they didn't play every day. There just wasn't much programming, so some days you wouldn't watch TV at all. So I literally played with things in the yard like rocks and old batteries and stuff that my dad would bring home from Carbide. I didn't have toys. I mean, I just had a couple of action figures or something, but there weren't many action figures. There was only G.I. Joe. But I think that's what's helped me because I spent all my time outside.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd sleep in the yard and sleep up on the hill.
You can't do that now with all the rapists out there.
That's right.
At least that's the official story.
John Keel talked about how people used to sleep in Central Park in the summertime. They'd just take a blanket out and sleep in Central Park.
It is a shame that we've gotten so afraid of each other when the most harassment in my life has come from government officials, mainly police. I've been harassed by police far more than I have just a guy out on the street. And that could just be my experience, but it's interesting that all the fear is supposed to be around us and each other.
I have a hard time believing it's all coming from Americans because why would we screw up everything that's good about our culture? That's why I tend to think that a lot of this is coming from outside. Now, I guess you can't sleep in parks in Europe, or can you? I bet there are some that you can. We're being despoiled for someone else's economic benefit, and I don't like that. Because my family's been here for centuries. I consider this my country, and it's not for somebody to come over and have a kid here and then suddenly say, and I don't mean to sound like a right-winger or anything, and then to, take a position of power and try to start telling me how I'm supposed to live my life.
Well, right. But do you really think the elite have any allegiance to any country? They just seem to be power-hungry narcissists who don't really... they're psychopaths. They don't really seem to be doing things for any kind of national pride.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, but I think there's some concern for their own backyard. I mean, they have their gated communities in the States, so they don't really have to worry about even what happens in their own area. But I think they're probably more prone to going haywire in somebody else's property.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It mitigates it, and I think you might see a trend where you've got less pollution around large concentrations of wealthy people living, and they've always tried to get you to use horrible chemicals on your dogs or your plants, and my grandfather sold seeds, and I'm sure he's rolling over in his grave when he hears about these Terminator seeds that Mothman come up with. So it's just the same people. It's the same people that rose to power and fueled the Nazi regime, and they're controlling our healthcare industry now because they put all the Nazi flight capital into the pharmaceuticals, and they've corrupted doctors in the hospitals and the health insurance industry, and they're all on each other's boards. And this is how they're milking every last spare dime that we have.
Yeah, it seems like even at the high levels of the field of medicine education is more of indoctrination. It's more, instead of being hands-on and seeing how things work, you're just told how things work, and then you're plugged right into the system where they give you the drugs, and you're convinced the drugs are doing help because you've been told that, and you got your degree. You couldn't be wrong if you got your goddamn degree and graduated top of your class. So, there must be something to it.
I call that the oil companies, the oil company doctors. I mean, the doctors work for oil companies, most of them now. They've been thoroughly indoctrinated in that. It hasn't always been that way either. It took them a long time. Like my partner, Lisa, her dad was a doctor. He was from the old school. He believed drugs were just to be used for a specific thing and for temporarily only. Mm-hmm. It's all about learning how to live healthily and all that. And so what the oil people did is Rockefeller infiltrated all the medical. He created medical boards. He manipulated municipal life unbelievably through municipal boards and doctor boards and education boards and sanitation boards. Mm-hmm. And it took, because we had an actual tradition here going back centuries that melded over after the British took over. It was still in there, still sort of embedded in the way we did things, and they had to get rid of that. And it took them 100 years of constant hammering and programming and manipulating the medical boards to get us where we're at today, where the typical doctor prescribes you antidepressants without even giving you a physical examination.
Yeah.
And you are hooked for life. They'll try to talk you into it for life. And they will milk every last time they can.
Touché. And
Horrible.
one thing I wanted to mention to you, I don't know if you saw the story that I'm going to address, but there seems to be a theme when a big disaster happens that the military is on a training op that is very similar to what's really happening. That theme seems to be pretty widespread. 9/11 had happened. Well, if you didn't see the story, a little while ago, there was a military training exercise right where I live here in San Diego, and the story made a bit of a splash, but they were doing training exercises defending against hordes of zombies. Did you see that at all?
Yeah.
I thought it was very strange that, one, they would even be doing such a training op, and two, the fact that it made it on the news for a couple of days, something we've discussed, is that...
Yeah, they've got their assets in the media. They'll just pump out anything they want. What day was that?
See, I'm not sure of the day. It was a couple of, maybe 2 months ago, I want to say.
Okay. Go back and look at what happened within a couple of days after that, because that sounds like a reversal story. I didn't bother to check it out.
Could have been right before Aurora, for all I remember.
Yeah, check that out, because that it sounds like a bogus op. I don't think they did that, but they wanted you to think they did, because that'll blow your mind for a few moments. Now they have lots of stories like that coming out of the military. Like they're teaching their soldiers to meditate. By next year, 1 million soldiers will have reached some form of enlightenment, and that's come on, reversal story. It's not, doesn't sound right. There was one the other day, a planet that spins backwards. No, a star system that spins backwards. And the drawing of it was an XX.
Really?
The that they put up, and it looked just like the Indian head test pattern, which is an XX, which they would have on TV all night long when I was a kid. Mm-hmm.
That's that standby screen?
Huh?
It's like that standby screen?
Yeah, if you turn it on in the middle of the night, you'd go into a trance probably. And then start hearing the UFOs coming. There was all kinds of stuff with the TVs back then. People getting messages on their TV being beamed from the saucers. They were trying out all kinds of things on people.
That's also interesting, as it seems like a lot of the things that we're talking about and a lot of the strange weirdness came out of the 60s, 70s, and I feel like it's kind of died down in my lifetime from 85 on. There's obviously still attacks and shootings, but a lot of the really weird paranormal stuff seems to have, we seem to always be talking about the past instead of current events.
Well, I don't know about that. There was a bunch of strange stuff that happened in the last 10 years, and I've documented it, as much of it as I can, which the book I sent you is fairly short compared to the other ones. They're about, one of them's 600 pages.
Wow.
And it's just example, I just documented everything. And because I was doing that and I was really putting an effort into it, it was nerve-wracking, and it did mess up my marriage, or, it gave an excuse to my ex that I was doing this. But you see, I had that premonition. And so after 911, I really had no choice but to investigate it. Because here's a clear example to me that I know is true, where I saw into the future. And so by following that, I think I triggered the synchronicities off. So if you've got something like that you feel like you should do to really honestly and truly be who you want to be, you might find that they'll start happening. But maybe you're doing that already. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough to know where an influence comes from.
I mean, do you feel like you're right in the center of your passion?
Yes, I do, but at the same time, I'm still stuck in a 9-to-5 corporate soulless job that is really interfering. And these it's almost like I'm split down the middle, and these two things are really butting heads with each other. But it's tough because you have to be able to pay the rent.
Yes, I worked at jobs until the mid-'90s, and then when I started actually being self-employed, it was very stressful, and it took years to get over it. And I really realized then how programmed I had been to follow orders, because when you're self-employed, suddenly there's no structure.
Yes.
But I think that maybe does. I think you're right. It probably would create more synchronicities, or maybe some aren't coming to you because of the regimentation that you face.
And how would you advise someone who sees all the corruption and sees the problems and the debt slavery and the media hypnosis and is just stuck in a low-paying corporate job, just feels trapped? How can a person find personal freedom and happiness without going homeless?
Oh, man. It depends on whether or not you can give yourself a lump of time. If you can figure out some way to not have to pay for the things for 2 or 3 months or something, where you can start something else, and then you have to start generating something. I mean, I found it's been rewarding, though. What I do is I work on houses. I mean, that's one of my side jobs or day jobs, is fixing stuff. And so, like, I just finished an addition I built on someone's house all by myself.
That's awesome. That's a great life skill.
Yeah, but it took a while of working for someone else, at least. So what I did was I became a subcontractor, and I found someone or two or three different people that could give me work every now and then. Mm-hmm. Something that a lot of it was earthquake stuff, because nobody wanted to do it. But it was profitable, so I made a lot of money during earthquake retrofitting. So I just figured out how to do it. And so whatever it is, wherever there's like an opportunity, I mean, if right now I'd start building drones. I'd learn how to build drones.
If you can't beat them, join them, huh?
Yeah, small business and entrepreneurship is the only thing that's going to save us, because the big corporations are going to crunch out every penny, and they're using computers to crunch out every penny you have. They will figure it out. So, and they don't want small business. They don't want competition. And as soon as you get a good product or idea or software or something, they'll buy you out. They'll just come in and take it from you. So beware of that, but set it up so that you end up making some money on it.
I mean, that's one way to fight the machine.
Well, that's how they reward their own people. The spooks that are in the software stuff get contract. They supposedly leave the spookdom, and they go start a business, and then the government gives them contracts, and then they get bought up by Northrop or Martin Marietta later, and they may end up making a shitload of money. So, but that's a rigged game in their favor. But you can also do that at your own level and still do well, because they're not meeting everyone's needs. They've got a big computerized model of how they're going to milk our money, but they don't really have a plan for meeting all of our needs. So we can still meet each other's needs at the local level.
That's a great point. Well, hey, I've taken up a lot of your time. I want to start wrapping it up, but I guess I would ask you, do you think they say that lies in the Age of Enlightenment will become more transparent, and I suppose it's possible that an upcoming event would be so poorly staged that it just destroys any trust people have in their leaders, but do you think we'll ever break out of this control paradigm on a massive scale, or will it just be on an individual level?
Well, there are certain pressures inherent in having larger and larger populations, so I don't see them, the leaders, changing their tactics unless they make them even more oppressive as more people get created.
And that really is the only power we have, is our numbers.
Right, and you are right. I mean, you're asking the big question: is there a way to fight this? And I like the temporary autonomous zone idea. That's where you got to start. You got to create, and I just described it basically. You got to carve out your own little zone,
little local area of like-minded people,
where you're not being programmed every day at the corporation, and you'll really feel better about everything. I mean, it is. I think back to some of the situations I was in, and I can't believe. I know they're still there, and I know they're still as stupid as they ever were, still as brainwashed, but I don't have to deal with them. And so it gives you hope that there's some spaces out here where you can live a creative life.
Right. Well, hey, you can build houses if you're ready to set up a city. Let's do this thing. No, but is there anything else you are working on, Andy, before I let you go? Anything you're coming out with soon?
The Mothman Squeaks is coming out soon. That's the next book after the Shrieks book. And I do recommend it for all of the details that I can't remember when I'm talking on the radio. It's amazing stuff. I do think if you jump in there and you try to wrestle with it, the synchronicities happen and the stuff comes. But then when you don't want to and you're building a house or something, it doesn't happen. And that's fine. I don't need it all the time. It really will drive you to the edge, especially if like your partner leaves and this happens and that happens, and it has driven some people crazy.
Understandable.
So I've always taken it lightly.
Go lightly, go rightly.
So yeah, don't get too worked up about all the crazy stories about how the reptilians are massing underneath this mountain in France, and they're coming to your house tomorrow. And I think, I grew up in a special place where people are close to the earth and they're humble and they have great sense of humor and they make fun of the rich, and that's how they get by, and they figure out their own ways of navigating.
Yeah.
And humor is definitely a good medicine for people.
100% agree.
There's no better way to really fight them, I think, than humor, because they start to believe they're stuffy, the country club class, their beliefs that they're superior because they're a doctor or lawyer or whatever, and making fun of them is the best way to go.
I 100% agree. That is kind of the THC philosophy. I mean, it is great to talk about it and to get some real knowledge and some real education to the people, but at the end of the day, what the fuck are you going to do, So just laugh about it.
Well, you can actually affect public opinion this way. Someone who's in the midst of their programming at the corporation will laugh at what you say, and it's one more little step back that they can take, and maybe they keep taking steps back, and then suddenly the stuffies, there's a lot of great movies out there, comedy movies, where the stuffy person who's trying to control everyone ends up with pie in the face in the end of the movie. That's what we want.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Andy, thanks a lot. I know I've just got keyed in on the Mothy Talk Facebook group, but there are a lot of heavy hitters there. Adam Gorightly and myself are both in that group with you. A lot of good information comes out of that group. I've just started looking at it the past few days, but anyone who wants to be somewhat connected to the ongoing education of the conspiratorial should really check that out.
If you want to check that out, and you can't find me on Facebook, if you go to Mothy Talk and ask to be a member, someone will contact you, but it won't be me because Facebook is censoring me like you wouldn't believe. I don't know. They won't let me. I can't add friends. If I message someone I don't know, they tell me that I don't know this person. They're controlling my friendships on Facebook. It's bullshit.
I thought people were paranoid when they said that, but honestly, I've experienced some of that recently, and when I put up certain pictures, they come across incredibly, incredibly pixelated. And I've been doing Facebook for as long as Facebook's been happening for people that aren't in college. You know, it only recently has that started to happen, and it makes me raise an eyebrow. But we gotta fight them with their own tools, and unfortunately, those tools are under their control at times.
It'll probably be Ted Torbitz who contacts you. He's I'm making him my first administrator. So
right on.
He's on the Sense of Truth show.
Yes, a great show. I've listened to some of your interviews on there, but that just about does it for our time here. It's been a real wild ride. I've had a blast. We've kind of jumped all over the place. I feel like your work is so diverse and interesting. We've really only scratched the surface of it. But yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here twice.
Yeah, I look forward to actually seeing if this makes it to the internet.
The chances are good, my man.
All right, great.
All right,
thanks
folks.
for having me.
Of course. Have a good day, man.
All right, bye.
And another one bites the dust, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Great talk with Andy Colvin and my co-host Adam Gorightly, who unfortunately did have to jet a little bit early after the second attempt at recording the show. But I am so glad that Adam has decided to join the Higherside chats. He's introduced me to a lot of new people in the conspiracy community. I've always been familiar with the David Icks, the Michael Tsarians, listened to a lot of Coast to Coast, and of course Alex Jones, but he's been schooling me on a whole new group of researchers that all seem pretty tight-knit, and it's pretty fucking refreshing, so I am very happy about that. You can check out more stuff from Adam at adamgorightly.com. And you can check out all Andy Colvin's books on Mothman, Mothman Photographer 1, 2, and 3, as well as Mothman Speaks, Mothman Shrieks, and soon to be Mothman Squeaks, all available on Amazon in both Kindle and traditional book formats. Check out my amazing conspiracy and paranormal themed t-shirts at conspiratees.net. Maybe I'll work on a Mothman design now after all this. It seems like it could be pretty awesome. Please share the show with your people. All the share links you could ever need are conveniently located at the end of every post at thehighersidechats.com. Donate a couple bucks if you can, but more importantly, review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. It helps us improve our reach and climb the ranks. In fact, some dickhead gave THC a poor iTunes review because he thinks I've been deleting his attempts at reviewing the show, and that is not even fucking possible on iTunes for me to delete reviews. So you people are just going to have to help me average out that score. Deal? Deal. I love you guys, and I'll see you again on the Sabbath. Have a good week, and try not to get brainwashed into opening fire on any crowds, because it will ruin your life, and it's just not cool, man. Okay? We're out of here. Here's a song by Adam Gorightly, a trippy psychedelic meditation track called Lost in Time. Peace be with you.
wah, wah, wah.